Welcome back to KTN Prime. Thank you for staying with us. It's now time for that one-on-one deliberation right here in studio. Now get this, in a post-Raila era, the quest for the soul of the ODM party has led to unlikely alliances, a dramatic change of guard, and a fallout in one of Kenya's most consequential political parties. Tonight we host Karoli Omondi, a lawyer by training and a strategist by instinct. A seasoned political player with practical experience on proximity politics. He understands power and its consequences, thrives near it, and knows how to shape outcomes. We sit down with a man in the eye of the storm, the Suba South Member of Parliament, who, by the way, was once labeled a rebel and now is a custodian of the Azimio la Umoja One Kenya Coalition Party's strategic future as its Secretary General. Karoli Omondi, thank you so much for your time. Karibu to our studios.
Thank you, thank you. Good evening.
Good evening.
Rogers, yes.
Looking forward to the fruitful conversation. And perhaps we can start with the latest developments before getting to the specifics. Just your reaction to issues that are playing out in Kenya's political and governance landscape. Because just yesterday, retired President Uhuru Kenyatta and the DCP party leader Uhuru-Gachagua, who were once bitter rivals, met in a funeral in Kirinyaga. And it sort of set the stage for their newfound camaraderie. We know in politics, optics is very important. And that's why I'm starting with this, because I'd like to get your take on whether this is the start of a united front as we try and shape the political path, not just for Mount Kenya, but for the country as we head to the 2027 general election. From your experience, is the writing on the wall, is a convergence inevitable, and how will it sway the 2027 race?
Thank you very much for that. Let me start by acknowledging that His Excellency, the retired President Uhuru Kenyatta, is actually the chairman of Azimio Council. Kalonzo Musyoka, His Excellency, is the party leader. He took over from the late Right Honorable Raila Odinga. Honorable His Excellency Uhuru-Gachagua and Uhuru are not strangers to each other. As a matter of fact, Rigathi was Uhuru's PA for a very long time.
20 years.
Yeah, 20 years.
Yeah.
And when we formed ODM, we were with them actually. Yeah. And I've always informed the people that the first contribution came from them, and it is Rigathi who delivered it on behalf of Uhuru. So they've known each other for a long time. Yeah, but they went different ways, and I'm aware that there's been a lot of interest to bring them back together. And I think what happened yesterday is to see good old friends overcoming their difficulties and finding a common ground to try and work together. I think it is important that we give them the space that is necessary for them to work through their issues. But I'm very confident that in the fullness of time, they'll find a common path. And I think it will be significant. It is going to be significant to the opposition. But I don't think it is just them who may eventually come together. Many, many elements of the opposition, I suspect, will come together. I'm smelling a 2002 scenario when people came from different directions, but at the very end came together to form the rainbow. And I think Kenya is heading to that moment. That is why I always tell people, under Azimio, I foresee about 16 million votes coming together under Azimio.
Well, it's a game of numbers at the end of the day. But listening to the former president, because he had a not so subtle warning to the Mount Kenya region, and I'll try quote him, not verbatim, don't make the mistake twice, be wary of smooth talkers, emphasized the difference between leaders and politicians. How do you view the sway of the former president in Kenya's current political landscape? Because his critics argue that when he was president and he backed Raila in 2022, he had the full weight of the state machinery, but he didn't make Raila's presidency a realization. Well, what do you make of his influence?
As a matter of fact, I think Uhuru gave his heart and soul to support Raila in that election. Raila had never been backed by more than 1.1 million votes from Mount Kenya area. In the last presidential election, Raila received 1.1 million votes. Raila had some organic support in Central Province or the wider Mount Kenya area, but it never reached that level. But in this last election, I know for a fact Raila got 1.1 million votes from Mount Kenya, courtesy of Uhuru's support. The community chose to go a certain way. Uhuru would have wished that they go in another way. But the problem is when people try to blame President Uhuru as if they wanted him to rig the elections, when they say he had the weight of the state. Yeah, I don't think that is right, because that would imply that he would have used undemocratic means to ensure that Raila won. There are those who believe that there were some flaws in that election. For me, I think the problem came much earlier in terms of the way the planning had been done, even before there was that agreement that Raila and Uhuru would work together. I'd actually warned that certain things would affect that election that I don't want to go into now. Actually, I'd warned even Raila that in my view, there were certain fundamentals that were missing. But President Uhuru, I do not wish, and I do not agree with those who blame him, that he did not support Raila. And I've always asked this question. Yeah. When we do our politics, and people are telling us that Mount Kenya people did not support Raila, what about the 1.1 million who voted for him? What about the other 200,000 who have always voted for him? Because even from the time we were in NDP, we used to get votes in Meru. Even the times of Jaramogi, didn't we get Paul Muite as an MP? We didn't win the presidential vote, but we had Kiraitu Murungi, we had Gitobu Imanyara, we had MCAs, Mpuru Aburi, people like Mpuru Aburi, you see. We've always had, Raila has always had very strong support from, what about SK Macharia? All those people who've been with him. So I don't agree with that. Uhuru did his best. It's the people made a different decision, and now he's telling them to reconsider. And that is the best he can do. And even this talk that Uhuru is supporting Linda Mwananchi, there's nothing like that. Uhuru is a very reserved man. He's going on with his own business. But the only thing that I found very significant is when he was touching his ear, because I know Rigathi also.
Wanaskiza ground.
Wanaskiza ground.
Okay, interesting. Yeah. Let's see how the cookie crumbles and how they will sway the Mount Kenya region in terms of voting when it comes to 2027. To another issue that has recently played out, and it has put parliamentary conduct on the spot. I'd like your comment on it, starting with the National Assembly. Member of Parliament Kitutu Chache South, Kibagendi, was actually suspended from Parliament for 14 days. According to the leaders who were supporting this, he used disparaging words that tainted the image and dignity of the institution of a Parliament. So in one or the other, they're arguing that, you know, what he said is not protecting the sanctity of the House. And two questions here. Do the powers of the Speaker extend outside the House in terms of censuring what members of Parliament have to say? And number two, what about the separation of powers? Because we had that come up while he was being suspended recently, that, you know, Parliament, the courts have no jurisdiction to stop the House from conducting its business. Your views on these two issues?
Yes. Let's not even go into the merits of what he said. Let's deal with the process. You've asked the right question. Yeah. When we are within Parliament, because we enjoy certain privileges as members of Parliament, you can't be arrested there, you can't be sued for what you say there. We must also have internal rules to govern those privileges. So we have Powers and Privileges Act of the National Assembly, which includes the Senate. And we also have certain privileges under the Constitution, including freedom of speech, which also includes freedom to vote. Actually, a parliamentarian cannot even be guided by his party how to vote in the House. It is just by way of caucusing. They can't force you to vote in a certain way. So because of those privileges, there are certain ways that we have to conduct ourselves. Now, members of parliament, within the precincts of parliament, for what they do in parliament, the speaker has supervisory powers to uphold those, the mechanics of shielding those privileges. But outside the precincts of parliament, other laws apply. If you defame somebody, then we have criminal libel laws, or we have defamation laws, or we have, lawyers will tell you there's something called the law of tort, which has certain remedies. So, as far as I know, and the problem with Kibagendi's case are as follows. Number one, he was accused of bringing the House to disrepute for utterances he made elsewhere. As a matter of free speech, that can be questioned because he has freedom of speech. Secondly, in politics, politicians, even if I go to court for defamation, I am held to a higher standard as a politician than you. In fact, there's criticism that is expected will be said of me as a politician, as a public officer. Yes, and any court will hold me to a higher standard, meaning there are some things that I cannot complain of. Secondly, under our standing orders number 89, if there's a matter that is pending in court, we call it sub judice rule, it's not supposed to find its way to the floor of the House. So remember, Kibagendi had been suspended ad infinitum. He was told you'll only come back if you render an apology. And I wondered where that came from, because I've looked at our standing orders. 28 days is the longest length of suspension. But anyway, he had been suspended. So he went to court, he got court orders that reinstated him and said he should not be punished again until the matter is settled. So the matter was sub judice. Yeah,
despite the doctrine of separation of powers?
Yes, because he has a right to be heard. You remember, even when he was being removed, he was not afforded an opportunity to defend himself. And under our constitution, one of the rights that cannot be limited is the right to be heard, right to due process, to a fair hearing. Cannot be limited, just like the right not to be made a slave. Yes, those things, they are rights that cannot be limited. So he went to court, he got a court order. The lawyers for parliament were there, so they knew about the court order. So he came back. In fact, I met him there. I asked him, oh, you are back? He said, yes. So, you see, because of the sub judice rule, that matter should not, the new motion should not have been moved in the House. And I tried to raise it. And of course, they didn't listen to me about it. But that was not the only one. There was the issue of Safaricom. The court halted the sale of the 15% stake in Safaricom. Again, that matter was on the order paper. I again invoked standing order number 89 and said, this matter is already before court and it has been set for hearing on 16th of April. So as a matter of fact, there's no hurry. We should just, I was told again, and I had the court rulings because the standing orders require that if I raise a matter on sub judice, I must submit the rulings, which I had in my hand. I was not even allowed to submit them. But let's go to the conduct of Kibagendi itself. There are two, there's standing order number 107, which talks about disorderly conduct, being disruptive, being disorderly, you know, not doing certain things. Then 107A talks about gross disorderly conduct. Under just disorderly conduct, the punishment is a caution, or, you know, it does not involve suspension, yes. But under gross disorderly conduct, you can be suspended. But if you are it's the first time you've been named, we call it naming, meaning judgment entered against you. You can only be suspended for 4 days under Article 1 and Understanding Order 110. So it could not have been suspended as Honorable Kaluma did for 14 days. It should have been first. If you are a first offender, the suspension is for 4 days. If you are a second offender, it is for 8 days. If you are a repeat offender 3 times, it is for 28 days. Okay. So I don't know where they got all this from. And that is why I said we are now behaving like George Orwell's Animal Farm.
And we had some members of parliament even questioning your legal expertise. Because you were trying to argue matters to do with the court order, what the court has mentioned, but they countered mentioning that, these courts have no jurisdiction on the business conducted by the House.
You see, they are misinterpreting the law. What the courts cannot do is to injunct Parliament before it makes a determination on an issue. Let's say there's a bill in the House, and we are still debating the bill. You cannot rush to court and say that this bill, if it is passed, it will affect me in this way, so stop Parliament from passing it. No, the courts have to wait until the bill is passed and assented to. Then it now becomes the subject matter of judicial jurisdiction.
So in the case of Safaricom, what was the issue finalized by Parliament, and that's why...
No, that is not the law.
Okay.
That is not, Safaricom sale is not making of a bill.
I get you.
Yeah. There are differences. There are things that Parliament, the courts have to wait for Parliament to complete the process.
Okay.
But remember, it is not Parliament selling Safaricom. It is the National Treasury selling Safaricom. It's not Parliament making the bill on Safaricom. It's different.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Still with Parliament, I'd like us to talk about senators and governors standoff, because it's played in the public, and this fallout actually threatens to undermine devolution as we know it. The page, or the front page of the Standard tomorrow, as you can see, has gone big with that story, brawls and betrayal. And it's quite unfortunate that Kenyans are being fed drama, which might be unnecessary if you go to the basics, because this is all about claims of hooliganism and extortion fronted against senators vis-a-vis claims of governors fearing to uphold integrity while facing the CPAC committee when they're poking holes into audit queries that have been raised by the Auditor General's report. Sticking with constitutionalism, who's at fault, and what's the best route for the favorable outcome that will benefit Kenyans in a way that devolution isn't affected, in a way that governors are held accountable, but we still get answers following the questions that were raised around extortion claims?
Yes. Let me start with the extortion claims. If you have evidence that somebody extorted you or received bribes, don't make noise about it. Go and report to the DCI. Go and report to the EACC if they are public servants. That is why even when there was the allegation that some members of parliament received 10 million in a committee to do, you remember?
Yeah,
yes.
President Ruto
yes,
himself.
We said, don't tell us. Report them. Yes, go and report. And let the senators who have been accused be exposed and be given, let the law take its course. But the governors cannot tell us they have this evidence and they have not presented it anywhere. And they are taking us around in circles and telling us that these senators are extorting us. Let them go and report that I bribed this senator so that we charge both of them. Yeah, it is not just the person who received the bribe. The person who bribed is also guilty. So this is utter nonsense. What the governors are doing is utter nonsense. But you see, the power of parliament to summon and to hold people accountable. You remember there was even talk that Senate has no power to oversight. Yes, when we read the Constitution and it was very clear and the word oversight is there, everybody retreated. The point is this, that power is in the Constitution, it is in the Powers and Privileges Act. If you look at parliamentary powers and privileges, even the military, there is no secrecy, they cannot hide. Even the security organs cannot hide under Section 23. They must appear and must produce documents. That is the law. So the governors cannot wake up and tell us that they met somewhere and made a collective decision that we will not be appearing before the Senate. That they cannot do. Because to accept it is effectively they are changing the law and amending the Constitution. So they must appear. They must appear. And that the shenanigans I saw with the police pretending to be looking for Sakaja while standing guard there, they know from his phone they can do triangulation and figure out where he is. or from insecurity. Why didn't they do that? That was taking us for a ride. Those are the jokes that must come to an end in this country. Devolution is being undermined and will die because of governors. We have said this so many times in the House. Everywhere you go, either the governors forge the academic papers, or if they are educated, there are people with corruption cases. There are people trying to dodge everything, which, I mean, there are very few governors you can be proud of. Those you can really talk about. We have had devolution now from 2013 to now. So the governors should stop taking us around. Actually, on a very serious note, we need to change so many laws to make devolution work. And one of them, which I've always insisted on, is for the money that comes from the national government to the county governments, we must insist, as the Constitution says, that not more than 30% will be spent on recurrent expenditure when it goes to the counties. But now we need to go further and change the PFM Act and adopt the CDF model, that when the money leaves Nairobi, it goes to a project account for a specific project. Okay. That's 70%. Is the only way we will save devolution. These governors are rogue. In the fullness of time, I think if there's change of government, I want to see proper accountability measures. Strengthen the Office of the Auditor General, Office of Controller of Budget, and bring proper investigative capacity to EACC and deal with this problem. Because so much money has gone down there, but there's nothing to show for it.
And sticking with accountability, I'd like to take a look where the shoe pinches, because those questions have equally been raised against the 13th Parliament, of which you're a member of. How has Parliament performed so far? Because the House's independence has been criticized. Some view it as an appendage of the executive. There are those who say that the 2024 June protests was a general indictment on Parliament, both National Assembly and Senate. We've had claims of corruption that haven't been substantiated. What's your assessment of the delivery of the 13th Parliament vis-a-vis the public expectations?
You know, I once said that the number 13, I think is associated with bad luck or something. And I wondered whether that was applying to this Parliament. My observation is that the parliamentary procedures and processes need to be rejigged. Number one, members of Parliament themselves do not understand how parliaments work in a presidential system of government. First, there's overemphasis of the parties in Parliament. In Kenya, parties are not elected. Individuals are elected, but individuals can agree to associate within the framework of a party. That is why when you go to the ballot, it is your name. And there's a symbol saying, I've agreed to associate with Rogers. In South Africa, it is the party that is on the ballot, not you. There are jurisdictions like that. We still don't understand it. And when you go to Parliament as a parliamentarian, you can caucus with your party, but your vote does not belong to them. So here, we talk of executive capture of Parliament. But that executive captures Parliament through the political party. So Parliament is not free of the political parties. Parliament is not free of the executive. And then within Parliament, members, we don't get priority for private members' bills. Very good ideas disappear because all the time is being taken over by government business, and the structures and today it is so dysfunctional that the leader of minority and the leader of majority work together, vote together, propose and second things. So the public is justified in not having confidence in the House. But there are such critical and fundamental questions. Some border on educating the members of Parliament, some border on changing the standing orders, some border on having reform activities. Yeah. For me, actually, my wish, if I was to advise Kenyans or plead with Kenyans, the next Parliament should have very many independents, very many individuals in single parties, Hiyo mchanganyiko maalum probably is what will give that house independence, so that we can have teeth. Yeah, there's a lot of problems there. Yeah, but it is so wasteful. The times we spent, today we left early because there was no quorum, but there was a lot of business. Bills are rushed. That's not how it is done. And then, to make matters worse, the leadership, those with the power, think Parliament is where they do their politics. So you find 20 minutes you are being lectured, on political events in somebody's political backyard, have nothing to do with the interest of the nation, parliamentary business, nothing. Somebody somewhere wants to respond to his political enemy, takes the microphone for 15 minutes, and they're just lecturing you on irrelevancies. Yeah. It's terrible.
Okay, it's quite unfortunate, and it sort of reminds me of William Ruto when he was still deputy president. I think it was at Chatham House where he was criticizing the handshake, saying it's formed a mongrel of government where you don't know where the opposition starts or where the government ends. So it sort of brings back those sentiments that were shared by the president when he was deputy president. Let's talk politics now. A lot is happening in the ODM party. You're still a member of the ODM party.
Yes, I am.
Okay. There's push and pull. We've seen a fight for the soul of ODM party. The ODM party recently held a special delegates conference to Jamhuri grounds as a parallel People's National Delegates Conference was held at Ufungamano House that focused on grassroots issues and opposing the mainstream party's shift towards the executive. Well, where does the future of Linda Mwananchi lie? Because it seems the party honchos have the party gripped and they know the direction they're heading. It seems inevitable that this UDA-ODM pre-election agreement will happen. So where does that lead Linda Mwananchi? Are you still fighting from within? Is this the start of, a push out of the party to form your own political parties, as perhaps you'll be doing, because you've been vocal, you won't be vying on an ODM party in 2027?
Yeah, personally, I will not run on ODM. I made that decision even when Baba was still alive. Because I understand ODM. I understand it. And I understand the people around there. Now, the difference between Linda Ground and Linda Mwananchi is fundamental. Just the other day, the Political Parties Disputes Tribunal said Secretary General Sifuna and the mainstream ODM should use internal mechanisms to resolve their problem. Now, internal mechanisms did not mean they start disciplinary process against SG Sifuna. But today they've issued a show cause letter. That is not, first, it is not complying with the ruling of the PDT, neither is it finding a solution. But that's how different we are. If you look at Linda Ground people, you see mercantilist politicians, who are inspired by financial or material gain in everything they do. That was not the founding philosophy of ODM. They are mercantilist. And if you study them keenly and if you know their backgrounds, many of them had been working at cross purposes with Baba but hiding. Yes, many of them had been on a journey to lead Baba in a certain direction and the party. And they've been doing it while pretending to be all over there. And they've been captured by external forces. The decisions you see them making or the actions they are doing, they are responding to commitments they have already made and for which they have already been rewarded. Now, if you're a true Baba follower, it doesn't mean you must be in ODM. True Jaramogi followers, people like Gitobu Imanyara, are elsewhere. Paul Muita is elsewhere. And many, many other people. So, for us, the thing that we are most concerned about is Baba's legacy. And then we want to deliver Baba's dream of a better Kenya. But we don't want to deliver it with mercantilists. We also believe very firmly that Baba built a political base. We must hold that base together. Like the 1.1 million people from Milima who voted for him. We must make sure we hold those people. We must maintain Baba's base. And then finally, yeah, we must clearly understand that however painful it may be, sometimes there are decisions you have to make to advance. Not all of us have agreed on this. Personally, I made up my mind earlier. My other colleagues still want to wage the war in ODM, hopefully get it from the other people, and carry on with it, with Baba's legacy. I'm more pragmatic. I do not want to waste my time on that. I think what makes a party is the people. We are with the people. Linda Mwananchi are with the people. Those people will end up with a piece of paper called registration certificate, but they'll not have the people.
But you know, critics might argue, we see people in their gatherings, the SDC had delegates at the end of the day, and they might equally poke holes into your pushing that the party has been bought. So how do you respond to critics who argue that the claims that ODM has been bought are merely rhetoric, to delegitimize your political rivals who are in the Linda Ground faction?
We understand ODM. We started with ODM when they didn't have anything. They couldn't even pay rent.
But they equally argue they started with ODM.
Those people were not there. Many of these guys came in between. These are joyriders who joined 2013, 2017. And people have blamed us that we left the space for them. Many of them, they have not made any serious ideological contribution to the party, even material support, nothing. They're just joyriders, conmen who knew how to play their ways around Baba. Now, that is who they are. But let me tell you, after their SDC, some delegates from Nairobi complaining they were shortchanged. Why is it that wherever they leave a function, people are complaining about not being paid or being underpaid? You never hear those things because we don't pay anybody to come to our functions. Nothing. We pay for that podium. We pay for the truck that goes around. We do a budget. We cut it by the number of people attending. We all contribute. Finished.
So no shadowy
Nothing.
funders.
These other guys, let nobody cheat you. These are guys who, for every activity, they double bill. Double dipping, there's something called double dipping. They bill the party, they bill their sponsor somewhere, they go around. We know what is going on there.
And we've heard of this philosophy by the late Raila Odinga, gather all, scatter none. Would you fault ODM party's leadership for cracking the whip on what they call indiscipline? We've seen the efforts to remove Sifuna. Osotsi was removed as the deputy party leader. Because if I'm the devil's advocate and I echo their sentiments, democracy does not mean indiscipline. Democracy does not mean chaos. If you're the mouthpiece of the party and you're propagating issues that are against the party's decision, isn't that indiscipline rather?
Think about it. We disagreed on the 10-point agenda. Because Baba was very clear. Baba was very clear. Don't talk about two-term. That he told you. Yes. He told us long before he said who told you.
Okay.
He was very clear. And he would be very angry with those who are talking about two-term. He said no two-term.
Okay.
He said everything is contingent on the implementation of the 10-point agenda. I hope we will have time to discuss that because
we're getting to that.
Yes, nothing was implemented there. These characters already made up their minds. They are going to engage with UDA. They've said it. So they've already said, without consultation, without building consensus, without engaging constructively to extract the best benefits for the members, they've already made up their minds. So they are moving. So when you tell them no, 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 you are a bother to them. They say that is indiscipline. Indiscipline does not mean differences of opinion. But if even your opinion cannot be considered, you are just being marshaled and told, we go. And if you say no, then you are indisciplined. Can you imagine all the people with good minds who questioned status quo or invented things? Galileo Galilei, was confined and died somewhere for saying the world was round. Yeah, these characters, they are not interested. They look for any excuse. Today they are saying Sifuna should explain why he's not attending meetings. Yet, whenever they call for a meeting, including the one they had in Kilifi, they bring vehicles full of people with knives to attack him. Even Winnie Odinga, they were planning to attack. So how do you go for a meeting like that? How can somebody planning violent attacks against you ask you why you have not gone to, presented yourself where they can attack you?
But it's okay to present contrary opinions. But at the end of the day, democracy dictates majority have their way, the minority will have their say. So you can have your say, but...
Okay. They are saying majority will have their way. Did they complete the national elections before they had the SDC? Was everybody represented? How many constituencies, members of parliament refused to send their delegates? If the truth is told, you'll be shocked. They did not. So who is the majority? Because they must make sure only yes men and yes women attend. Those who will agree with them. Yeah. And if you don't agree with them, then you're indisciplined. So for me, I saw those things long time ago, and that's why I did not want to waste my time there. Yeah.
What's your view on the party leadership? We saw the party ratify some decisions, including the party leadership. You're critical, saying it's more of a coronation than an election.
Yes, because for the first time, there was no contest. Nobody was allowed to contest. They said, actually, their paper said, we have come to ratify decisions made elsewhere. There was no election. You see, when Mandela retired, he retired and he lived for several years before he died. When he retired from ANC, Winnie Mandela, who had been active in politics in her own right, was not rewarded with any position in ANC. Was he? Was she? Just close by Julius Nyerere, when he retired and he left CCM. I know some of his children. His wife was my mother's teacher. Later, one of the daughters would be nominated to the National Assembly. Much, much later. But none of the relatives staked claim on anything. Because to me, I look at Raila at the level of Mandela, at the level of Nyerere. Not these other parties you see that neighboring us here.
But that might be the ideal scenario, reality of Kenyan politics. I mean, Uhuru Kenyatta is still associated with Azimio and Jubilee, despite his exit. So it shows the dynamics in Kenya a little bit different. Parties are built around personalities.
But Uhuru's son is not in Azimio.
Fair enough. Okay. I'd like us to perhaps talk about the 10-point agenda. It would be a disservice if we had you here and didn't get to canvass the issues. We saw a progress report given by President William Ruto and the ODM party leader not too long ago. You disparaged that progress report. Well, what's the true state of affairs under this broad-based government? Has it delivered, apart from bringing a moment of political civility that was much needed after the upsurge in the Gen Z uprising in 2024?
Yeah, you remember I used the analogy of the miniskirt when we launched the 10-point. I said the miniskirt should be long enough to cover the subject matter, but short enough to arouse interest.
Yes.
This report that was released by Zani, if you look at it, it's not even long enough to cover the subject matter, the 10 points. Neither is it short enough to arouse any interest of a deep discussion on what happened. Let's take examples. Compensation of victims of police brutality in demonstration.
They say 2 billion has been set aside.
On what basis? When did they ever know the number of those who are injured? When did they ever know the injuries? The dead, the disabled, the ones who have lost their income. When did they ever know them? They don't. So how can you set a figure before you even know the number? The first step is to collate, get all the data, agree on the data, that these are the victims and these are the injuries. Then you start working outward. The reason why they are to put some 2 billion is to hoodwink Kenyans that something is being done. But who told them that it will be enough?
But we've seen efforts through Kenya Human Rights Commission to ascertain who exactly is a victim, who will be considered.
Remember, they first excluded the Kenya Human Rights Commission. It is the court that forced them to go and do that. So they didn't even want a constitutional commission to discharge its duty.
But now that the Constitutional Commission is
so
there,
they should wait. They should wait for the civil society members. It's not a simple job for Kenya Human Rights Commission. It should be the collective work of civil society, because there are people like IMLU, Vocal Africa, who have been working with these people. Let them collect the data. Let Kenya Human Rights do their work and say, these are the people, these are the injuries, these are the ones we lost, this is a complete picture, and these are our recommendations. Then there's a budget. Don't just come and put a figure of 2 billion. Who told you that's enough? When did they figure out how? You know, the compensation itself is just expiation to express remorse. It is not what is needed. What about justice? The element of justice. When did they ever bring the police who are guilty and say, this is the full list, these are the investigations? No. So that has not worked. Go to corruption. Was on the 10-point agenda. Let me tell you something about what is going on. I don't even want to talk about small corruption and all these little things that we are used to. Like the Americans have said yesterday, is it?
Yes.
On tender racketeering and all those things. There is grand larceny going on in this country. We talked about Safaricom and the valuation of Safaricom. Safaricom, if you look at it as a telco, you are missing the point. Safaricom is a financial business. And the way you value a financial business is different from the way you value a telco. And even if you want to value a telco, you cannot rely solely on the quoted share price. There are more sophisticated methodologies of valuation. Regression analysis, cash flow, discounted cash flow method. If you apply those parameters, the value of Safaricom for the 15% is not the value they told you, 285 billion. And I've asked experts who have guided me on this. It comes to between 350 and 400 billion. Remember, even when they started off talking about the sale of Safaricom, there was 9 billion of dividends, which they never told us where it would be going. They brought forward the date of completion of the transaction before the dividends would be declared. And we raised hell. That is when they moved it to 1st April, so that the dividends would have accrued by that time. So already you can clearly see there's a problem. Take the case of the sugar mills that were privatized or leased out. Those sugar mills had nuclear estates with grown cane. It was never valued. There's no rent paid for it. Somebody is crushing it and pocketing the money. If you go to the sugar, next week, I am going to Miwani with Parliamentary Committee. There's 10,000 acres of Miwani land. This government is giving it to a private person who has admitted before the committee he never even paid a shilling for it. We asked him, okay, if you bought it, whom did you pay, what method, where? He said he couldn't remember.
That's on record.
Yes, that's on record. Take Talanta Stadium. When we did the financing model of Talanta Stadium, when we analyzed it, there was 6 billion extra expenditure on the financing model. There was no tender for the construction. There was no once there's no competition, how do you know the value? Take the affordable housing that is being done, that is being touted everywhere. If you look at them, even conceptually, they are based on bed space theory. You get a room, you see the people who are living the slums and moving in there can't even fit there with their families. And without giving them extra income, you see in their mabati houses, even though it is 1 room or 2 rooms, they can cook using firewood and a few other things. They won't do that in the flats. So there are very many fundamental questions. And even the flats that have been built in the rural areas, I can give you examples. There are some of the 100 that have been built, only 2 have been bought. Because somebody in the rural area, who will buy them? There are so many things.
Those are critical questions. Yes. You highlighted the fight against corruption. The proponents of the Kenya Kwanza administration might list the steps they've taken, be it passing of the Conflict of Interest Act, as efforts to, rid the country of this graft issue. Is that a drop in the ocean? Have they made any progress whatsoever in making sure that corruption is no longer with us?
Completely irrelevant. Conflict of interest. That was a conditionality of the World Bank that they are to fulfill. Completely irrelevant. Oxfam, the analysis, 100%, Kenya has scored 9% on fight against corruption, this administration. If anybody in Kenya is serious about fighting corruption, you start with strengthening the office of the Auditor General. Give it capacity, give it the skill sets it needs, enough resources. That's where you start. Then you go to controller of budget. Then you go to EACC. Then you establish special corruption courts. Then you bring criminal investigation bill, which we don't have in this country, that can allow financial tracing. And then you unleash investigators. Then you put cases to start and not to end. 10 days, finished. You will change Kenya. This government, do you hear them talking about corruption? Even all of them, which government officer can you say is serious about, talks about corruption every day? Who?
Okay, I'll leave that question to the Kenyans. I'm pretty sure they're the best judge of character at the end of the day. Since we're talking about the economy, how would you rate Kenya Kwanza's handling of the economy? Because we've heard of the Singapore dream that will emphasize on high domestic savings, massive human capital investment, lean government spending, which made it a reality in Singapore. I don't know about the foundations in Kenya. Perhaps you can speak to us about it. But at the end of the day, we see figures. Inflation rate has gone down, the strength of the Kenyan shilling against the dollar, certain issues that the government tout time and time again will be their ticket to re-election. We've had President William Ruto saying his development track record will speak for itself. But there's usually a disconnect between perhaps the lower inflation rates we're facing and the purchasing power of the Kenyan household. So briefly, how would you summarize the Kenya Kwanza's handling of the economy?
You see, the Singapore dream, as I said before, imekuwa matimboroa. You must have building blocks to deliver on such a dream. You must have some building blocks. And the most critical building block is integrity, clean government. Clean government, as Lee Kuan Yew would call it, clean government. That is not there.
Okay.
So that is a starting point. Yes, clean government. So that investors can trust you, people can trust you with their money. There's no pilferage. Projects that are supposed to cost 1 billion are not priced at 2.5 billion. Tendering is transparent, it is competitive. That is how you deliver that. On this issue that the economy has stabilized and all those numbers, they mean nothing if you don't boost incomes. Because even if you stabilize prices to what they are now, what they are now is a function of previous inflation. The prices already went up. So even if you stabilize them there, the prices have not dropped. Yeah? But the prices remain there, but the incomes are also not growing. So recently, they introduced even, is it the new NSSF tax? And a few other things on the pay slips, which are now at about 40.3%. So if you are 40.3% of what you are earning goes away in taxes, you still have your mortgage to pay, you have school fees. What are you going to save? What is there to save? In fact, let me just, what is there to save? So this idea of even NSSF, if you look at the commitments that NSSF has been subjected to, I think they've put some money in Rironi, this dwelling thing.
Yeah.
They've been asked to put more money, is it Bomas of Kenya? I don't know where. I don't know the sustainability of NSSF in the long run. I've not looked at the numbers keenly, but I just know they're all over the place. And I even suspect, because the offtake in KPC, Kenya Pipeline, did you see the various sectors? Everybody ran away from Kenya Pipeline, including the employees. Go look at the amounts that were reserved for them. Mm-hmm. Yes. Even the retail investors, even the oil marketing companies.
Okay.
Eventually it was NSSF and Uganda and the rest who put in the money. So I don't know what is going on there, why there's no interest.
Okay, those are nitty-gritties. But we've seen the establishment of the National Infrastructure Fund that has come with what I'd call good tidings in terms of development projects that are set to be continued, those that are stalled. Some are being launched across the country. You mentioned the Rironi-Mau Summit Road. Will this actualization of development projects change the narrative in this financial year, in the next financial year, change the narrative that is currently going on in the country? Will the Kenya Kwanza administration be able to change or turn the tide?
Because of these projects?
Development, kusema na kutenda. He says his development track record will speak for itself.
You see, if the incomes are not growing, if people are not getting jobs, then what development are you telling them? Are they going to eat the roads? What are they going to do? If the children finish school, they can't get jobs. You know, the Nyota program was the World Bank's way of saying sorry to African youths. But it was meant to help them enhance their hobbies. Mm-hmm. It's not something meant to help you start a business. What will 25,000? Unless you have a hobby of taking pictures, selling, loading on TikTok, creating content, those kind of things. Those are not very long-term issues. Okay. So if you don't boost incomes, and you don't create jobs for people, and you don't fight corruption, I mean, what are you selling to Kenyans?
Fair point. As we finalize, you're the Secretary General of Azimio la Umoja One Kenya Coalition Party.
Yes.
Some critics might argue that, you know, the revival of Azimio after the 2022 general election is a flogging of a dead horse, considering the short political lifespan that coalitions in the country actually have. As you respond to that criticism, how exactly will you manage to actualize reciprocity to the other political actors who supported Baba for years, especially in a region where perhaps ODM is the dominant party? Because at the end of the day, you mentioned you're trying to bring in, is it 16 million votes?
Yes.
Yeah, so how will you actualize that semblance of reciprocity, and how will you bring in these progressive-minded individuals, including the Gen Z, who might see Azimio, by the way, as part of the problem, not necessarily part of the solution?
Yes. First, I think in the next general election, there will be no Luo or Kikuyu on the ticket. I said it more than a year ago.
So gone with ethnicity, that traditional voting pattern?
We don't want those historical conflicts festering. We want a new Kenya. There'll be no Luo, there'll be no Kikuyu. And I'm being blunt here. On the ticket, at least on the Azimio ticket. Yes. 2, it is going to be a compromise between old generation and new generation, because everybody, to deliver the knockout punch, we all must be together. 3, those who stood with Baba all through are known. They are known. And those who joined, and those who are willing to join to deliver Baba's dream, those are the people we want to focus on. But everybody must agree on a very serious program of changing Kenya. And there are people, even if they come to support us, we will not agree. There are people we don't want to come and support us. Yes. Because there are people who are all over the place, you know. They are the common denominators of all administrations and problems. But this will be a compromise that we will have to reach, and everybody has to sacrifice. But for me, what I've always believed in is to take the country forward. We must listen to what the young people are saying. We must engage them, Tomorrow, there's a very big activity in Kitengela, Niko Kadi, by Bob Njagi. I would encourage people to turn out in large numbers, go there, register as voters. And that group will be the force that will sustain accountability in this country. We need a force. Everybody must now walk on hot coals when you're in public service. You must know you can burn, so that it's the Gen Zs to hold fire to their feet. Yeah, and I'm very confident in the fullness of time, we are going to revive Azimio in its full strength, and it will have new partners. Yes, that's why Kirinyaga event was very significant. To me, I'm seeing great opportunity. The things you are describing, hizo vitu za kushika masikio, I think we have a very good opportunity here.
Has ODM lost ground, its traditional voting base that was, that pledged its allegiance to Baba?
When we started ODM, in a parliament of 210, ODM won 96 seats on its own. Today, in a parliament of 290, you can see where they are. Yeah. And even, you remember the by-elections,
Yes.
They lost in Western Kenya. Yeah, they lost in Kajiado. Those were our traditional strongholds. So there's a problem.
But it will be a daunting fight, because if we're talking about mini polls, Kenya Kwanza managed to secure majority of the seats during these by-elections we've witnessed in the country. So it's not walking
Look at my interview. I said,
yeah,
whoever wins in Bere will win by hundreds of votes. They won by 500 votes. But remember, there were 2-3 polling stations that had issues in Bere. That is how Bere presidential elections have always been.
Okay.
They are very closely contested. Malava, there were serious flaws. But let's meet them in Olkalau.
That will set the stage. It will be a true litmus test.
We are waiting for Olkalau.
Interesting.
Yes.
Okay. Well, that's how we wrap up tonight's conversation. Thank you so much, Karoli Omondi. Definitely appreciate your nuggets of wisdom and just getting your take on Kenya's current political landscape. He's the Member of Parliament for Suba South constituency and the Secretary General of Azimio la Umoja Coalition Party. He said come 2027, he's not vying on an ODM ticket. Still same position. That's what you're targeting.
Yeah.
Okay, interesting. Let's see how it all plays out. Asante sana for your time. And that's how we wrap up tonight's edition of KTN Prime. Thank you so much for watching. Hope you're adequately informed. My name is Jesse Rogers. Happy Easter holidays to each and every one of you. Enjoy the season, and remember, there's a reason for the season. Good evening.